Malik considered it a miracle, when God answered his prayers, and saved his beloved Malika from being attacked and raped by the mob that trailed them to the hotel. The following day, the couple checked out and headed directly to the airport. They decided not to spend any more time in the Emirates. They reached the airport without any travel plans. By chance, they came across a Lebanese man who advised them to go to his country. Like the Egyptian imam at the States, that man sang praises of the beauty of his country and the fairness of his people, which convinced them to travel to Beirut. Through him, they learned that Lebanon was an Arab country with big population of Christians. On their arrival, the couple came to know that the city of Beirut was divided into two sections, West Beirut and East Beirut. Between the two sections, was a green line of demarcation which had been created during the Lebanese Civil War of 1975 to 1990. It separated the mainly Muslim factions in West Beirut from the Christian Lebanese front in East Beirut. Besides that, there was the city of Jauna, which was located 16 kilometers away from Beirut. Jauna was known for its wild nightlife. The couple chose to stay in the Muslim section. They already learned their lesson from their experience at Dubai. Malika covered her entire body from head to toe with black burqa. This time, instead of staying in a hotel, the couple rented an apartment at the Hamra Street. The place where they came to stay was dominated by Shiite Muslims who were supporters of Hezbollah. The taxi driver who brought them from the airport advised them to stay in that area. He was the go-between who helped them to get the apartment. He also was a follower of that Lebanese terrorist group. Malik and Malika, in hurry, introduced themselves to the taxi driver and their landlord that they were new converts to Islam. In haste, they disclosed that they were Americans. Muslims of the Middle East hate Americans more than they hate Satan. Arab Muslims and Arab Christians alike share the same hatred towards Americans and Jews. Even if an American embraced Islam, it does not allow him to escape their hatred. All their misfortunes in life are blamed on America and Israel. Hezbollah's terrorists and supporters would never trust a white man or white woman. All whites were treated with suspicion and considered either spies for Israel or agents of the West. Whenever they came across white people who converted to Islam, they would be put to the test. They were expected to prove their loyalty to their new faith. They would tell them that as Muslims they have to join the Islamic Jihad against Israel and the West. When the information reached the ears of top leaders of Hezbollah, they decided to smuggle the American couple across the border of Israel and place them in the hands of the Palestinian terrorist group of Hamas. The leaders expected that the couple might not accept their decision and hence planned to kidnap them and then send them to South Lebanon where their strongholds. A date was scheduled and plans were made. Fortunately, on the same day the terrorists decided to put their kidnap scheme to work, someone came out of the blue and saved the American couple. The person who saved the lives of Malik and Malika was a Lebanese Christian. He was a senior officer in the Department of the Anti-Terrorist Police Force. His team intercepted a phone conversation between a terrorist leader in Saida and another one in Beirut. It revealed that there was a plot to kidnap two Americans living in an apartment at the Hamra Street and take them to South Lebanon. Immediately, the senior police officer came with his team and informed the couple about the plot and moved them out of that area. Following their second miraculous rescue, Malik and Malika moved from western Beirut to eastern Beirut and stayed in a Christian house in an area called Al-Mansaria. The majority of the people in that locality were Christians. Moving from West Beirut to East Beirut like traveling from a Muslim country in the Middle East to a Western country in Europe. Or like moving from Mogadishu to Los Angeles. You would see no more women clad in burqas and walking on the streets like black ghosts accompanied by bearded men. Now, you would see pretty girls dressed up in jeans and t-shirts, and short clothes walking hand in hand with their boyfriends. You also could see young women in bikinis and lying semi-nude at the beaches. Men and women mixed freely without any restrictions. They could dance together in discotheques and nightclubs. There were rumors that, in some hotels at East Beirut and Jouni, there were stripper dancing halls, and in certain beaches women walk freely in the nude and topless. The Christian home, which Malik and Malika came to live in as paying guests, belonged to a Maronite Syriac Christian family. The Maronite family had 2 teenage girls and their parents. The father spent most of his time at home either watching TV or reading local newspapers. He was jobless and heavy drunkard. Each girl had her boyfriend who come regularly and picked her up and took her wherever he wanted. None of the 2 teenagers ever told her parents where she was going or what time she would come home. Even their mother had her boyfriend who visited her often and took her out. Her friend was double of her age. His dress and name showed that he was a Muslim. His name was Muhammad, but his girlfriend called him Hamada. Although his wife was having an open affair with another man, this improper relation seemed not to bother her husband at all. He was living on the income of his wife, who was worked in a beauty parlor. He also knew that his wife was having an affair with a very wealthy Muslim man, which explained her extravagant lifestyle. It was she who supplied his drinks and smokes. Every evening, the Muslim man would come in his expensive car, beep his horn for his girlfriend and wait until she sat beside him in the passenger seat. The car would then drive away. Every day, her husband would hear the horn, see the car and its owner, watch his wife dress up smartly after she had already applying all kinds of makeup and very expensive perfumes. He never once asked her where she was going and whom she was going with, or even what time would she be expected home. He always remained deaf and dumb to his wife and daughter's improper behavior. Malik and Malika were astonished by the incredulous immoral behavior of the members of that Lebanese Christian family. They realized that those Arab Christians were misusing the freedom they had in their religion. It didn't take long for the couple to understand that those people weren't true Christians. They were just professing to be Christians, but their manner exposed them. They were just born in a society that considered Christianity was something that people could inherit from their parents and pass it on from one generation to the next generation through blood. Although they called themselves Christians, still they had no relation with Christ and had no knowledge of the Holy Scriptures. Their behavior was not based on the moral teachings of the Holy Bible, which forbade adulterous relations, but drawn from their Lebanese culture. When they arrived in their house, Malik and Malika introduced themselves to the members of that Maronite family as Christians. Malika had already stripped herself of that coffin-like black burqa. After she moved from the Hamra street, she didn't see any need to dress up in her Islamic cocoon or behave as a Muslim woman anymore. Immediately, she switched back to her Western clothes. At first, the couple decided to stay for a short time in the house of that Christian family and then move to another Muslim country. But the behavior of these quaint nominal Christians led Malik to change his mind. He convinced his wife of his intention. He decided to preach the gospel of Christ to those people. Before doing that, Malik decided to visit a Lebanese church and find out what kind of Christianity those people follow. One Sunday, the couple visited a church, which they chose at random. Being a Lebanese church, its service was in Arabic, with a third of its members being white. Most were of European descent married to Lebanese. Lebanese Christians loved marrying whites. There is no specific explanation to this phenomenon except that some citizens of that country simply prefer fair skin, blonde hair, and green eyes. Lebanon was called by some, Switzerland of the East and Beirut, Paris of the Orient. Some say, Lebanon and its capital city were given those names because of the beauty of nature and mountains, and some said due to the fact that the majority of its inhabitants were Christians. Many Lebanese believed that those names were of the past. During and after the Civil War, many Christians left the country and moved to the West. Muslims' numbers increase by the day, while Christians decrease rapidly. Today, there were 2 officially recognized armies in the country, the Hezbollah's army and the Lebanese government's army, with the former being more powerful. Without a strong police presence in the country, the Hezbollah's soldiers, or terrorists, were in a free-for-all. Accordingly, the proper name for Lebanon today should be Iran of Arabia and Beirut would be Tehran of Phoenicia. When the couple entered the church, they did not feel comfortable. The church resembled any one of the white churches in South Africa during the apartheid. Only whites and Lebanese Christians would feel welcome. Malika, being of Indian origin, was thought to be a maidservant from Sri Lanka. The pastor of the church approached Malik and asked him if Malika was indeed his maidservant. Before Malik could explain the misunderstanding, the pastor's wife directly asked Malika why she came there. Then, she advised her instead she should have gone to the Burj Hamid church where there was special service for the Sri Lanka and African maidservants at Khanasat al-Abid. The pastor translated the words Khanasat al-Abid to the couple before they asked him to do so, the Church of Slaves. The couple were shocked by the kind of reception extended in a house of God. They became more perplexed when they heard that there was a special service for the slaves. Malika doubly flustered to being taken as a maidservant by the pastor of the church, and the slave of a white man who dared to bring her along to a church for free people by the pastor's wife. Malik was more astonished than his wife, especially when he heard that there was in the 21st century a church for slaves. He decided to go and see with his own eyes what kind of a church it was. The couple immediately left, feeling that even Jesus would feel unwelcome in that congregation. The following Sunday, they stopped a taxi and asked the driver whether he knew the Khanasat al-Abid at Burj Hamid. The driver told them that everyone in Beirut knew the Khanasat al-Abid, or the Church of Slaves. Before we enter with the couple that church, let us find out what kind of people lived in that area. Burj Hamid was founded by survivors of the Armenian genocide of 1915 who fled the death camps of the Turks. When the sick and exhausted Armenians who had survived the death marches in Deir-ez-Zor, Syria, arrived in Beirut after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, they were given the right to construct shacks on the eastern banks of the Beirut River. At that time, it was an expanse of swamps and marshes. The Armenian genocide, also called the Armenian massacres, was a systematic and premeditated extermination of 1.5 million Armenians by the Ottoman Empire during and after the First World War. They were killed for no reason except that they were Christians and their murderers were Muslims. The Muslim tyrant Javidud Bey said, "I shall kill every Christian man, woman and, pointing to his knee, every child, up to here," quoting Morgenthau, Henry 1918. Ambassador Morgenthau's story. Garden City, New York Doubleday. That evil tyrant had killed every Christian man, woman, and child. Anatolia or Turkey was once a 100% Christian country, but Muslims turned it into 99% Muslim country. It is also called the First Holocaust. It was the systematic annihilation of all Armenian Christians and also targeted other Christian communities such as Assyrians and Greek Christians. Millions of the forced deportees were driven to the Syrian desert after having been deprived of water and food and subjected to periodic rape and robbery by the locals and Ottoman soldiers. As the pastor's wife had announced, the church was known to all as Khanasat al-Abid, which literally means the Church of Slaves. To speak the truth and be fair to the Arabs of Lebanon, the church wasn't so named because its members were actually slaves or owned by some people. The name was invented by the Arab Lebanese due to the fact that all the members of that church were black people or people of dark skins who were originally came from either Africa or Asia. Africans and people of dark skins were called by the Lebanese Abid, which means slaves. This naming isn't only confined to Lebanon, but used by all Arab countries. If you are an African American and visited Lebanon, people would call you Abed on your face. Whether you would like it or not, that is the way those people would see you. Even if you went to Harvard University and became the President of the United States of America, you would be nothing to them, but merely a black slave. These values towards blacks are shared by all Arabs, Muslims as well as Christians. Wherever they lived or wherever they went in the world, they will always carry these values with them. Accordingly, if you are black person or has dark skin you would not be welcomed in many Lebanese churches and most probably you would be advised to join the Khanasat al-Abid, the Church of Slaves at Burj Hamud. The pastor of the Khanasat al-Abid was a Nigerian. Its congregation members were Nigerians, Kenyans, Sudanese, Ethiopians, and maidservants from Sri Lanka. There were other Africans from Liberia, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, and Madagascar, but they were the minority. There was also a sprinkling of Asians from Pakistan, India, Indonesia, and Philippines. There were over 400 regular members. If you arrived late you might not find a seat. Latecomers would be obliged to stand on their feet during the entire 2-hour service. Before the 2-hour service there was at least an hour of testimony. There was nothing more of significance worth mentioning except that its members were discriminated against by the Lebanese Christians and forced to create their own church. By the way, the members of that church did not call their church Khanasat al-Abid, but the name was bestowed upon them by their fellow Christians of Beirut. It was proudly called by its members, the International Church of God. There was nothing extraordinary the couple had found when they visited the International Church of God except that it was one of those modern Pentecostal churches, which focused its teachings around the prosperity gospel. No one of its members seemed to be rich or prospering in his or her life. Every member of that church, and that included its pastor and elders, were victims of exploitation, low salaries, high living expenses, lack of access to basic facilities, and lack of freedom to move around. Sometimes, their external perils could lead to isolation, depression, despair, and eventually suicide. They always got exploited by the local police and robbed of their savings by Hezbollah's militants. Female migrant workers were victims of sexual harassment by their employers and very often got raped by the police officers and military soldiers. Most of the migrant workers entered illegally in the country and hence they had no official permits to work or to stay in Lebanon, and that made them vulnerable targets to the police and soldiers. In Lebanon there was no difference between the police force and the military army. Everyone in uniform could stop you and do whatever he wanted with you if you happened to be an illegal alien. The fighters of the so-called resistance army against the Zionist country, the State of Israel, were terrorizing all people in Lebanon. If you visited Beirut you would see Hezbollah's terrorists carrying their machine guns and standing in every street and corner and demanding donations for the so-called resistance army. Imagine yourself being confronted by someone as big as gorilla, wearing on his face 1-meter-long beard, with an AK-47 in one hand and a bag in the other, demanding donations for the resistance army. Of course, the only way to appease such a terrible terrorist was to hand over to him whatever money you had in your wallet or purse. After attending the Sunday service in the International Church of God, the couple decided to have some entertainment to help them to dilute their sad experience the 2 church visits had given them. So, they went to downtown Beirut to watch a movie. They asked someone to direct them to the best cinema hall in town. They explained to that person they were looking for a movie theater that showed foreign movies in English. The person showed them what they were looking for. When they reached the cinema they selected the hall based on the poster which displayed an English movie. They did not want to run into a hall that showed movies in Arabic. Their knowledge of Arabic language so far was zero. Whenever they heard people talking in Arabic, they sounded to them as if those people were speaking gibberish. In the church that they had just visited everyone spoke in that gibberish manner for an hour, but claimed that he was speaking a heavenly language. The pastor said that only God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit could understand the language he and his congregation were speaking in mystery. When they entered the hall, Malik quickly noticed that there was not a single woman among the audience except Malika. That knowledge did not bother him when he remembered that the theatre was located near the Riyadh al-Solh Square, where the green line of demarcation that separated East Beirut from West Beirut. He thought that the majority of the people in the cinema hall were from the Muslim factions. That day, the movie hall was so crowded because it was a holiday. Unlike other Middle Eastern countries, Lebanon's official weekend, when government offices and schools close, was Sunday, not Friday. Everyone in the hall smoked freely, which turned it into a literal smokehouse. Another thing that troubled the couple was that every pair of eyes were constantly staring at the only female inside the hall. Malik tried to dispel the fear from his heart by thinking that it was naturally that the marvelous beauty of his beloved and her sensual figure attracted the curiosity of those Arab men. That particular Sunday, Malika happened to be dressed up in tight jeans and sleeveless shirt with high heels shoes. The way those Arabs kept staring at her with lustful eyes while whispering amongst themselves led Malika to feel as if she was the one out of place and sitting bare naked in a public place. The daring behavior of those lustful men caused Malik's heart to be gripped with fear. He recollected their bitter experience at Dubai with those lustful men who kept chasing them until their hotel. He worried that if some of the men decided to carry out the content of their hearts, he would be outnumbered and unable to prevent them from harming his wife. He decided that they would both watch the movie but leave the hall a few minutes before it ended. The great incredulous shock for the couple was yet to come. Malik had prepared himself for the worst to happen to them in that crowded theater hall, but his mind would have never conceived or remotely think of what his beloved and he were going to experience soon in that hall. He thought, some of those lustful Arab men might suddenly attack and rape his beloved. He also heard that some Arab men were notoriously homosexuals, so that some of them might rape him too. Thus, his mind was working hard trying to figure a quick exit before a catastrophe befell them. The couple came to that movie theater hoping to watch an interesting English movie. When the movie began, they started to watch the last thing on earth they expected to see. The movie began by showing two young white girls having sex. The lesbians used sex toys while making love with each other. They were fully naked and all their private parts were fully displayed on the big silver screen. Before the couple could overcome the first shock, the scene was changed. Now, they began to see one white woman having sex with three white men. All four were naked. The first man was sodomizing her, the second one inserted his penis in her vagina, and the third one was inside her mouth. Then, the scene shifted to one white girl having sex with an animal. It was a black dog. Yet, another young girl was holding a large organ of a donkey and sucking and licking it. After that, she tried to insert it forcibly in her parts. She was screaming from the terrible pain that had been caused by the large organ of the brute. A third girl, behind her, was doing the same thing with a horse. The audience began to whistle and shout loudly. They seemed to be so excited and overjoyed by what they were watching. By then, Malika and Malik began to shake from head to toe and sweat terribly. They had expected anything to happen to them except what they were seeing with their naked eyes in that public Arab theater. They were taken by a surprise. They were perplexed and confounded. They were at a loss. Their minds stopped functioning and all their limbs were paralyzed. Before they could overcome their helpless situation, the big silver screen began to show some Arab men in their Saudi and Gulf turbans having sex with small female children. The children were a mixture of Arabs, Pakistanis, Filipinos, and Africans. Most probably, the African children were Somalis, Ethiopians, or Sudanese. The female children's ages were between 9 to 13 years old. Some of them looked younger than 9 because they did not have breasts yet. The Arab men were grown-up adults and some of them were old men. Every one of them holding 2 to 3 children and having sex with them. The children were screaming due to the terrible pain that had been inflicted on their tiny bodies by the large organs of those human beasts. The Arab men were trying forcibly to insert their large organs inside the small private parts of those children. Some of them were trying to sodomize their small victims. Malika was the first one who managed to jolt herself from her stupor. She forced herself to stand on her trembling legs, managing to do so without falling down. Then, her right hand found her husband's and she jerked him out of his shell shock. Without uttering a word, she led the way across the dark hall and hurried towards the exit. Malik stumbled twice and fell one time on someone. He did not feel there was need to apologize to someone who came to watch such sheer evil. Still, Malik's heart was beating fast and his entire body was perspiring. His heart also was filled with indescribable wrath. He knew that, if he happened to have a bomb in hand, he would not have hesitated for a second to detonate it. Even savages and barbarians wouldn't enjoy such outrageous acts. Malika wished in her heart that all those Arab men and the cinema's staff were shot across their heads and their filthy bodies burned with unquenchable fire. The three incredulous experiences Malik and Malika had faced at the Black Kaaba, the House of Allah, the Dubai Square, and the Beirut movie theater created so much indignation and disappointment in their hearts. They made them to despise all the Arabs that they came across and counted them among the savages and barbarians. Whatever they heard about the Arab world were false reports and propaganda. When they were in America, the media showed them totally different picture from what they had seen and experienced in the Middle East. The Western media showed them as strict societies where women were covered from head to toe and the men with long beards and continuously worshipping their Allah. It showed them as so strict and moral societies, flogging drunkards, whipping fornicators, stoning adulterers, chopping hands of thieves, beheading murderers, hanging gays, murdering their wives and daughters through honor killing, etc. The American couple had never expected to watch in the Arab world what they had watched in that cinema hall, which located at the heart of the capital city of Lebanon. They had never anticipated seeing the number of prostitutes, pimps, adulterers, and fornicators at the Emirate of Dubai. They had never thought to go through the sexual harassment and immorality that permeated the Black Kaaba, the seat, center, and the most holy shrine of all Muslims of the world. Malik and Malika discovered that the Arabs were the most hypocritical people in the world. They condemned the Western countries as lands of immorality while in their lands they practiced all kinds of vice. The Islamic Mujahideen wanted to blow themselves up in non-Muslims' lands and kill innocent people because for them they were immoral and unclean kofar, infidels, when in their countries were full of all kinds of filthiness, immoral and practices. Accordingly, the couple wanted to forget about their research on the abuse of women in the Muslim world and return to their land. The land of freedom and human dignity, the land of human rights, women's rights, children's rights, and even animals' rights, the landing shore of the European Puritans and Pilgrims, the secured homeland for the refugees and persecuted immigrants of the Third World, the land of freedom of worship to every religion of the world, the land of Christ and Christians, the protective place for Jews and Hindus and Muslims. When Christians were persecuted by the Church of England and the Church of Rome, they fled for safety in that land, and when the Jews were killed in Europe, they found safe haven there too. When the Russians fled from Joseph Stalin, the Chinese from Mao Zedong, the Arabs from Saddam Hussein, and the Africans from Idi Amin, they sought refuge in that welcoming land. It is the land of everyone and for all who seek protection and yearn for better opportunities in life. The Ten Commandments are the umbilical cord of its constitution, and its laws are based on the divine ideals of the Sermon on the Mount, Deuteronomy 5, 4-21, Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. It is the greatest country in the world. It is the superpower and the rule of the entire free world. It is the zenith of Western civilization and the pride of all civilized nations. It is the first revolution in the world, the first great constitution, the first country to separate religion from the state and grant freedom of worship to all religions, and the first country to have civil war against slavery. It is the land of Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King. It is home to the Statue of Liberty. In short, their land is proudly called the United States of America.